talking about what it means to be a countercultural church. So if you're just joining us for the first time, we've been working through what we call our core values, which are the things that we want to define us. And so we want to be a Christ-centered church. We want to be a church that's shaped by the Scriptures, the Bible. We don't want other things to shape us. We want to be being made in the image of Jesus. That's the goal of the Christian life, is to become like Jesus. And then from there, we want to be passionate worshipers. We want to be mission-minded. We want to be joyfully generous. And today, we land on this one that says we want to be countercultural. It's sometimes a helpful way to sort of grasp what that looks like, what that means. And I had fun putting this together, is to just go through each of the books of the Bible. I didn't do all of them, but I did quite a number of them, of the New Testament. And go, where's this idea of countercultural come from? Because it's not a word we find that's in the Bible. So where do we get this idea from? And it's a word that's trying to sum up, to put together a number of different ideas. So we're just going to read through. We'll read through in sequential order, because that's in the order that they go through the New Testament. But Kate, I think you have number 1. Would you start? And then if you have who has number 1? Emma has number 1. If you start with number 1, and then 2, and so on. Go for it. And would you stand up and read in a loud voice?
No, don't say that.
Sorry.
In John 17, verse 14, it says, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world.
Yeah. So Jesus says, the world's going to hate you because I've given you my word, and it hates me, so it's going to hate you. Okay? We're going to dig into this more later on. Number 2. So Jesus gave the disciples a very clear mandate. Make disciples. Go and tell other people about me so that they encounter me and they start to follow me, because I can give them life. That's the mandate from God. And the religious leaders are saying to Paul and Peter and Paul, not Peter and Paul, Peter and, I forget who it was now. Saying to them, you have to stop. We told you not to preach about Jesus anymore. And they're saying, no, but we have a higher authority. Jesus told us to do this, so we have to do it. Yeah? And humans don't like very much, who have authority, don't like it very much when you say, you're not my final authority. God is. Number 3.
Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
So there it is again. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Number 4.
Ephesians 4, verse 1. I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Now this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds.
Tyler, thank you. Paul says in Ephesians 4, you walk in a way that is worthy of the calling Jesus gave you. Don't walk like the Gentiles. Don't walk like those who don't know Jesus. Walk in the way that Jesus has called you to walk in. Number 5.
Philippians 3, verses 4 and 7. If anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, Hebrews of Hebrew. As to the law, a Pharisee. As to zeal, a persecutor of the church. As to righteousness under the law, blameless. But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ.
So Paul says, I have reason for confidence in all of these things that we know lots about. Our education, our heritage, all of these human things. And he says, actually, I consider it all rubbish. The things of this world, I don't put any confidence in them. I only put confidence in knowing Jesus. Number 6. Ash, yeah.
Philippians 3, verse 20 to 21. But our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ, who will transform our
Yeah. So in the same way, even our citizenship. I'm a citizen of two places, England and America. Anyone else have other citizenship, other earthly citizenship? England and something else? Nathan? Pakistan? Anyone else have citizenship somewhere else other than...
Found out a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul says in Philippians, no, your primary citizenship, your primary loyalty, the place that is home for you is not here on this earth, it's in heaven, where Jesus is at. Yeah? Number 7.
Colossians 2, verse 8. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ.
Yeah, Paul says in Colossians, don't be taken captive by the ways of thinking of this world. Be taken captive by Jesus. Yeah. Number 8.
1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope.
So because our citizenship is in heaven, not on this earth, we don't grieve in the same way either. We grieve as those who have hope. It says that those who have fallen asleep in the Lord, those who have died knowing Jesus, we will see them again. Number 9.
James 4:4. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God.
James uses the picture of friendship. You can't be friends with the world to muck in with that crowd and still be friends with Jesus. Friendship with the world is enmity, is making yourself an enemy of God, because they're diametrically opposed. Number 10.
Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul.
Yeah, that's from 1 Peter chapter 2. The picture there is that we're sojourners and exiles. Yeah, we're not from. It's like when you go and live in a foreign country. You're an expat or you're an immigrant, and you're not from that place. Well, in the same way, we as Jesus followers in the world, we're not from here anymore. Our citizenship is in heaven. Number 11.
Number 11, 1 John 2, 15 to 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, and the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever.
So again, there's this contrast between the way of Jesus and the way of the world. Its systems, its power, its authority, all of those things, it's opposed to Jesus. And John says in 1 John, don't love the things of the world. Joe.
Revelation 19, verses 11, 16 and 19. Then I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse, and against his army.
So Revelation was the vision given to the Apostle John about how's Jesus going to, he promises to come back and put an end to evil, but how's it going to happen? And John gets this revelation, this vision of how it's going to happen, and he records it for us so that we can have some idea. It's still kind of hard to understand sometimes. But what Joe read is that at the end of the end, or just nigh the end, Jesus is there, and he's sitting on this great white horse, and he's come to put an end, and all the kings of the earth have gathered for war against him. And so the reason, in a sense, that Paul and John and Peter all say, don't love the things of the world, and James, is because at the end of the day, when Jesus comes back, the things of the world they're going to gather together for war against Jesus. All the governments, all the systems, all the ways of the cultures, all the ways of doing things of the world, they're going to end up against Jesus. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about what it means to be countercultural this morning. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians in chapter 1 and verse 18 with that in mind. And we're going to kind of try and bring some clarity from that passage to some of these ideas of the world and Jesus and what does it mean to be countercultural in the midst of that. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 18 through to 2 verse 5. So it's a long passage, so we're not going to go into detail, but I'm going to pull out some ideas for us. Chapter 1 verse 18. For, says Paul, the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. It's a great word, thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through its own wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, which is a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your own calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. Anyone of noble birth in here? No, most of us are not. Consider our own calling. Not many of us were wise, were of noble birth, had power. But God chose, here's the good news, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. He chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, that don't exist, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of him you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boasts in the Lord. And then he continues just briefly in chapter 2. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, but I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Has anyone seen the movie Cars? It's a Disney movie, Cars, Flash McQueen, the red racing cars. Anyone seen that movie? Yeah. My son loves this movie. But there's a moment in this movie where Flash McQueen is having trouble. He's having trouble going around when he's NASCAR. You know NASCAR? Do we get into NASCAR over here, or is it just an American thing? It's an American thing, okay. So NASCAR drivers, they always turn left, because it's one big circle, it's a big oval, and they go round and round and round. And Flash McQueen is having trouble when he hits the one bend at high speed. He keeps spinning out because he can't figure out how to keep his speed and go around the bend. And so this old, he doesn't know it, but he's a former racing car. But this old car comes along and he says, you know, in order to get around the bend, you actually have to turn right to turn left. And Flash McQueen goes, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. Turn right to turn left? That's ridiculous. And the reality is, as a race car, when you're going very fast around a bend, your back wheels start to lose grip. And if you keep turning left, you end up backwards. And so at some point, as your back end starts to spin out, you have to start turning right to turn left. And eventually, he gets it. But if I can use that as an image of what it means to be countercultural, that the world around us is going, Jesus, turn left? Turn right? That doesn't make any sense. Why would God come down as a human just to die? That's ridiculous. It's folly, it's laughable, it's mockable, or it's offensive. And Jesus is saying what it means to be countercultural is to say, actually, we need to turn right in order to turn left. You don't understand it yet, but you will. And at some point, Flash McQueen, he's driving down, and he's in the race, And he starts to spin out, and he suddenly comes back to him, and he starts to turn right, and he goes, oh, it does make sense. It works. Yeah? And sometimes you have to start to try Jesus out a little bit before it starts to make sense, before he starts to open your eyes, and you go, oh, but to the world around us, Jesus doesn't make sense. And Paul walks us through that here in 1 Corinthians in chapter 1. And the first idea that he wants to convey to us is this idea that we serve a countercultural God. He doesn't, hallelujah, he doesn't work the way the world around us works. And he talks about that in verses 1 through 25. He says that the world, and he calls out these folks from the world in verse 20. He says, where's the one who's wise? Where's the expert? Where's the expert in your field, the academic, the trained person? Where are you? And he says, where's the one who is the scribe, the religious expert, if you will? Where's the debater? Where's the philosopher of this age? He calls them out, and he says, these are the people that the world looks to for wisdom. And the world looks for salvation. He compares the Jews and the Greeks. And I want to suggest to you that our world still looks to that. The Jews, they're looking for salvation. They're looking for a powerful Messiah. He's going to come in glory, and he's going to conquer everything and restore the kingdom to Israel. And Jesus came to die. And the Greeks, they love philosophy and logic and wisdom. We know the great Greek philosophers, Aristotle and Socrates, thank you, and Plato, and others. And they want things to make sense, and they put the ideas together. And some of you have read them, and they're interesting and fascinating. But Jesus doesn't make sense to them, logical sense. Why would God come to die? There's too many. Doesn't make sense. It's laughable. It's mockery. Jesus is a stumbling block. And Paul says, actually, God's wisdom looks like foolishness to the world. His power looks like weakness to the world. And the reason is because, as I said earlier, the world around us can't understand why would God, first, I'm talking to some Muslims recently, and they said, why would God come as a human? That's demeaning, isn't it? They're looking for glory and power. It doesn't make sense to them. Why would God come as a human? But not only come as a human, but with the express purpose of dying on a cross. What a shameful death to hang naked on a cross, your hands nailed to the sides, your feet nailed, mocked and spat on and whipped. Oh, why would God do that on purpose? But the second reason that Jesus is an affront to the world is because all of the world's systems are built around us earning our own salvation. Yeah, have you felt that? Whatever tribe you come from in a human sense, whatever your background is, whatever culture you're in, whatever strata of society you come from, in everyone there's certain things that you need to do to be a good person, to earn respect, to be right with God. They put it in lots of different ways. But it's all about you have to do a certain number of things to have a meaningful life so that God will not hate you anymore, that you might have a future in heaven. It's all about what you have to do. Yeah? Because somewhere along the line, our pride says, well, I want to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. And Jesus says, hey, there's nothing that you could ever do to get right with God. You can't do enough good stuff to right the wrongs. And that's why Jesus came. And so the hardest message, in one sense, for people around us who don't know Jesus to accept is that I can't do anything. That's why I need Jesus. Jesus did it all for me. It's a very humbling, almost humiliating thought. I can't do anything to get right. We do this in human relationships, don't we? I wronged someone. I hurt someone's feelings. I missed an appointment. How can I make it up to you? Yeah, have you ever said that? You're trying to make it up to someone else. God says, you can't make it up to me. That's why you need Jesus. And he ends in that first section in verse 24. And he says, Christ, to us, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the reality is we can't ever earn enough to get right with God, but Jesus came and did it for us. What does that mean for us today? Has anyone else discovered that the world's solutions don't satisfy? Has anyone else discovered that? Jonathan? Yeah? You discovered that the world's trying to, whether it's in career or family or friends or love life, whatever it is, the world's solutions don't satisfy. Eventually they run out. And so the good news is God doesn't work the way the world works. And he's saying to you this morning, come to me. Come to me. I have water that will satisfy. I'm like a well that never runs dry. We sing a song about that, Abide. And so if you're still considering Jesus this morning and you're wondering, why Jesus? Why not this or that or A, B, or C, religion or way of thinking or just getting on with my life and doing it? The reason is because ultimately Jesus is the only one who can satisfy that deep need that each of us has for hope, for security, for truth, for purpose. The world tries to satisfy those things, but it falls short, always. So come to Jesus. He's standing there with wide open arms, and he's saying, come. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I'll give you rest. It's good news. The second thing is that as a church, we want to be the right kind of countercultural. I've met some people, I've met some Christians even, who are the wrong kind of countercultural. They're different. The goal is to be different. The whole point is to be different. There's some folks who sometimes go out in the street and they preach, and they sound angry, and they're not hellfire and damnation and this, that, and the other, and condemnation. And it's like, and people sometimes come past War on Book Table and they say, are you with those guys? And we're like, not really. We want to talk about Jesus. But they're like, well, they just sound angry. Yeah. They're known for being angry. They're not known because they love Jesus. Does that make sense? So we want to be known, we want to be different, not because we're trying to be different. We want to be different because we know Jesus. Jesus is the one who makes us different. One of the key things about that is that Jesus is the dividing line. Yeah, we don't want to make it hard for people to come to Jesus. We're going to talk about us as a church, as a community in a minute. That's the next part of the passage. But we don't want to make it hard for people to come to Jesus. That's what James says to the Council of Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15. He says, don't make it hard for people to come to Jesus. In other words, don't put up all kinds of hoops they have to jump through. Well, you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and you have to take this class, and you have to do X amount of good things, and da-da-da, and you have to dress this way. We can put all kinds of stuff, and it's like, no. Jesus is the dividing line. We want you to come and encounter Jesus. He'll work change in your life. Yeah? Are you tracking me with me there? This is so key. Jesus is the dividing line. We don't want to make it hard for people to come to Jesus. You don't have to do anything in order to come to him. You just have to come. Jesus is the dividing line. And so as a church, as leadership, we're very, what's the word I'm looking for? We're very intentionally looking for ways that we as a church might start putting up barriers for people. Might start making it hard for people to come to Jesus. Yeah? We want to make it easy. All you have to do is come. He wants to meet you. And the second thing is, we don't want to be surprised when the world doesn't like us. Jesus said, don't be surprised if the world doesn't like you. They don't like you because they don't like me, and I'm in you. But he also says, there's no benefit in if you do something wrong and you get punished for it. That's your own fault. I was reading an article that struck me this morning in the paper, in the Telegraph. It was just a little headline, but it said, who's the coach of head coach of Arsenal? Mikel. Yeah. And he said the Football Association is looking into Arsenal at the minute because they think their celebrations might be too passionate and emotional. And the head coach said, if you want quiet and boring, I'm paraphrasing him slightly, if you want quiet and boring, go to church. If you want passionate, come watch a football match. He's not wrong. Yeah? The church is known for stuff, but not for the right stuff. We want to be passionate about loving Jesus. I loved singing together this morning. It was good. Yeah. I love it when we engage in prayer, and it's work, and it's hard, and sometimes it's awkward to pray together, but we keep at it because we're passionate about it. We serve a countercultural God. We want to be known because we love Jesus, not for any other reasons. And so we are a countercultural people. In verse 26, Paul continues. He says, consider your own calling, brothers and sisters. Remember where you came from. Remember the hole that Jesus pulled you out of. Does anyone remember the hole that Jesus pulled you out of? That deep, dark place when you were at the bottom. You didn't have power. You're not weak. So you are weak. You don't have power. You don't have wisdom. You're foolish. He pulled you out of that, and he made you like Jesus. He gave you that incredible value of having his Spirit inside of you. And so he says, remember your own calling. In other words, we shouldn't put on airs. We need to make sure and think that we're not better than we think we are. We don't want to fool ourselves. And this comes down to, friends, that we are a countercultural community. Just as God is a countercultural God, we want to be a countercultural community. And there's three things that I want us to just grasp that. The first is that one of the reasons that the church doesn't understand us, it doesn't like us because of Jesus, but it doesn't understand us because we don't operate like it operates. It seeks wisdom and power and authority to achieve its ends. We seek Jesus to achieve our ends. Big difference. Big difference. So churches all over the place are busy trying to adopt the world's way of doing things in order to achieve whatever ends it's trying to achieve. And Jesus says, no, you don't need to adopt the world's ways. You just need to seek me. In other places, the church is trying to, one of the things in America that is difficult for me is that because Americans they do business. It's like the air they breathe. Churches have this business aspect to them. It's part of the culture. It's part of the way that culture is seeped into the church in America. In this country, other stuff is from the culture seeped into the church. But some churches try to operate like businesses. Jesus says, best business practices are not necessarily bad, but you don't need them in order to do what I've called you to do. You just need me. Yeah. So the church keeps running after all this stuff. No, Jesus says you just need him and his Spirit inside you to do what he's called you to do. That's the first thing. The world doesn't understand the church because we don't operate like it operates. We're seeking Jesus. The second thing is this, is that the church, unlike any other human society or institution, is genuinely open to all. Some institutions are exclusive, and they say that on the door. This is a men's-only club. This is only for, we're not sure about women's-only clubs these days, but yeah. This is for Tottenham supporters. This is for Arsenal supporters. Yeah, we sit on different sides of the state. Sometimes it's by race. Sometimes it's by finances. Sometimes it's by place in society, class, that's what I was looking for. Sometimes it's by who you hang with. Sometimes it's whether you're clever enough or funny enough. Every group that humans make, ultimately, it's exclusive. What's the word? It divides over human stuff. And the church is the only place you can belong to that doesn't discriminate. That's what I was looking for. It doesn't discriminate against you for anything. All are welcome. Any who bow the knee to Jesus, who say, I want Jesus, anybody can come. It's the only place on earth. The world tries to imitate that. One of the buzzwords, is diversity. I want to be diverse. But I've been in those spaces, and there's something not quite genuine about them. It's a false diversity. It's a fabricated diversity. And the reason is because ultimately those things, for their unity, they depend on human stuff, having the right things in common. But what if I don't believe what you believe? What if I don't live the way you live? Unity's gone. And Jesus says, through Paul, he says, here's in verse 30. Here's what he says about our unity. And because of him, because of God, you are in Christ Jesus. You know who could be in Christ Jesus? Anybody. Regardless of race, creed, class, anything. Doesn't matter. You could be in Christ Jesus if you come and bow the knee to him. You are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption, so that, as it is written, the one who boasts, boasts in the Lord. So we boast, we are in Jesus, and we boast in him. Why am I making a big deal about this? Because for us, in this place, have you noticed how incredibly diverse Wolverhampton actually is? It's fantastic. It's one of the most exciting places I've ever lived. I love walking down the middle of the street and be able to talk to people from all over the world, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of religious beliefs. But for us, as people who have been called by Jesus, we have to keep our unity based around this idea that we are in Jesus, we belong to him, we know him, and we boast in him. As soon as we start finding other stuff to boast about, as soon as we find other things to be united about, wow, we all play basketball over here on Saturday nights, and we're united around that. Well, Emma doesn't play basketball, so all of a sudden our unity's split up. But we can all belong to Jesus. Anybody. And so again, we are very intentional as a church about saying the thing that unites us is Jesus. I'm going to come over here for a second because there's an aside to that, which is this. The human reality is we do come from a lot of different backgrounds. And the other reality is that it's easier to just hang out with people who are just like you. Have you noticed that? It's a cultural. If people have the same cultural stuff as you, it's just easier. You have to make less effort to be with them. And so we do need to keep making an effort. Even as we have our unity in Jesus, we have to keep making that effort to reach out to one another, spend time with one another, show hospitality to one another, especially those who come from a different background than you. Yeah? Tracking with me? Our unity is in Jesus. The world that imitates tries to imitate that unity, but it ultimately fails. It can't live up to it. One of the things that there's this humility that's around the church, as Paul's talking about here. We don't do pedestals in this church. Yeah? I don't put myself up on a pedestal. I don't even like necessarily calling myself the pastor of the church all the time. Sometimes I use it as a title because it's helpful to people outside the church. Some of you call me pastor sometimes. It's okay. But I don't consider myself above any of you. Yeah? And if you see me putting on airs, hopefully someone will say, Pastor, down. And that's why we have leadership as well, and trustees and elders for that accountability. Another way I say this often is the real ministry of the church is not for the pastor and the elders. It's for you, all of us. Jesus has real ministry for you, here and in the week. A countercultural strategy. We'll close here. In the beginning of chapter 2. Paul talks about how when he first came to Corinth, he says, here's how I approached you. I didn't come to you with brilliant speech and plausible words of wisdom and argument. He actually did that in other places, in Athens, in Acts chapter 17, amongst others. But he says he actually came in fear and trembling and weakness, without plausible words of wisdom. He came just with Jesus crucified, Christ crucified, and this is what he's done in my life. Paul had a testimony. He had a story. Can I encourage you that our strategy to do what Jesus has called us to do, to make disciples, is a countercultural strategy. This isn't saying, hey, be bad at speaking to people on purpose. Stumble over your words on purpose. Be unsure of your words on purpose when you're talking to someone about Jesus. It's not saying that. It's saying that someone hearing about Jesus and him doing work in their hearts doesn't depend on you being really good at that stuff. In other words, anybody can share Jesus because it doesn't depend on us. It depends on him. But you notice that the stuff that most of us worry about when we have the opportunity to talk about Jesus, I do this in the street on a regular, but I still have this, is I don't have the right words. I don't know enough. Yeah? Is that what you guys worry about as well? Please tell me you're the same as me. Yeah? And Jesus says, hey, I called you to obey. I said I would equip you. I said I'd give you my Spirit who has all the power. He would give you the right words in the right moment. Trust me. Trust me. And Paul says his goal is that as people start to trust Jesus, that their faith would not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. And the way that he does that is what he calls the demonstration of the Spirit and power. Can I suggest to you really simply that this demonstration of the Spirit and power he's talking about is the transformation of lives, the Corinthians' lives. When someone's life radically turns around and Jesus pulls them out of that, out of where they were before, and he turns their lives around, that is a demonstration of the Holy Spirit's work in their hearts and the power of God. And he can do it. I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it recently. And we just get to be, the crowd, if you will, that's going, yes, God, you're so amazing. Another way of saying that is that he doesn't need us. He doesn't need us to draw people to himself. He really doesn't. But he does want us. Because here's the incredible thing. As much as you want all that we talked about salvation earlier, and hope and joy and security and purpose to your life, as much as you want all of that stuff, Jesus doesn't just bring you back to zero. He says, no, I've got this amazing thing for you to do. And it's about seeing people come to know me. And so friends, we keep saying this, but wherever Jesus takes you somewhere during the week, it's a job, it's taking care of kids, it's school, it's university, it's wherever you are during the week. And he's placed you there, yes, so that you would work hard and give him glory by working hard on whatever he's given you to work hard at. But above and beyond that, and way more long-term than that, he's placed you there because you know people who don't know him. But it's more than that they just don't know him. It's that they are dying inside because they don't know him. And they're desperate for him and they don't even know it. They're crying out for something, for relief, for hope, for peace, for joy. And so friends, I want to come back to that again. Who do you know that doesn't know Jesus? The great truth of this passage is that you don't need to know all the words. You don't need to know, you need to know Jesus and what he's done in your life. And so can I encourage you this morning? Can I encourage you? Trust Jesus. He promised he'd give you the power. He promised he'd give you the words. He promised he would give you boldness. Step out in faith. And I know it's complicated in the actual practical doing of it, but step out in faith. Who do you know? Maybe for the first, you're at this place where you're going, I need to, Jesus is attractive to me. Maybe you're on the other end. You're going, I haven't quite taken that step, going, yes, I'm going to trust Jesus. I'm going to give him everything. Everything, all of it. I need to make that decision. Maybe you need to, wherever you're sitting there right now and you're going, what do I do? And the answer is, close your eyes and you talk to him. Maybe do it as we close in song. You close your eyes and you talk to him and say, Jesus, I want to trust you. You should tell somebody if you do that. Tell me, tell Andrew, tell Best, tell Joe. Tell somebody if you've done that. I want to close with this lyrics from this song, a song I used to listen to when I was growing up. It's by a group called DC Talk. Does anyone know DC Talk? Oh. There's a new version of this song called Jesus Freak by Owl City. It's fantastic. I was going to play it this morning and I thought, another time. It's a fantastic song. Here's what the chorus says. What will people think when they hear that I'm a Jesus freak? What will people do when they find that it's true? I don't really care if they label me a Jesus freak. There ain't no disguising the truth. When I was in high school, I did a lot of thinking about different religions. It was my transition from adopting my faith as my own and saying it's going to be my faith. And it was a very intellectual thing, but the heart thing came when there was a big talent show at the school. And me and a couple of buddies, we used to lead worship at our youth group. And we said, we're going to go. We'd mess around and play blues and whatever. So we're going to play Sweet Home Chicago. And we're going to play a couple other blues tunes. And then we're going to end with Hillsong, One Way Jesus. And this is a school where it was hard to be a Christian. Some of you guys are in schools where it's hard to be Christians. Or have been in schools. I took a lot of flack for it. But we got up there and we nailed our colors to the flag. To the, you know what I mean. Yeah? We said, this is who we are. And that for me was that moment of going, and so my encouragement as we end is this. Friends, life is too short to waste time trying to fit into the world. Life's too short. You guys who are young, start young. It gets harder as you get older. Ask your parents. It gets harder to do risky things, to stick your head above the parapet for Jesus. If you get used to doing, it's the same thing with giving money away, as an aside. If you're young and you have some disposable income, you should give it. Don't give it to the church. I don't care. Give it somewhere. Find a good cause and give it a cause that loves Jesus, that loves the local church. We'll be specific about that. Yeah? But you start doing these things when you're young because it gets harder as you get older because you have more to lose. Reputation, money, you got a family to take care of. But my encouragement this morning is wherever you are, figure out how to stop caring how they label you. Be a Jesus freak. Stick your head above the parapet. Life's too short, friends. And Jesus is too good to miss the opportunity. Because that's what happens when you start to walk in his way. You start to experience his goodness at deep levels that you never thought were possible. It's incredible.